It's always nice to talk about players that you're really excited for the upcoming season, but I really think it's more important to hear takes about guys that you are avoiding and fading. So today, me and Chuck Bass on Player Profiler are going to go over our four most faded players for the upcoming season. So the first player that we are going to talk about today is James Cook. This was my pick here, Chuck. James Cook of the Buffalo Bills. James Cook had a good year last year overall. When you just look at the fantasy numbers, right? RB8 on the season in total fantasy points, and on the surface, it looks really good, right? But this is also a guy, Chuck, who had 18 total touchdowns last year, and I think is inflated with those touchdowns. You think about where he finished on a points per game basis. He didn't crack inside the top 10 while having 18 total touchdowns. More than 50% of his fantasy production came
Yeah.
from scoring touchdowns, which is really, really not something you love to see. And this is also a guy who just barely rushed for over 200 times last year and just had 32 receptions. I don't know if the volume's there to justify taking him where he goes. He's somewhere around like the RB 14, 13, 14. And I'm just avoiding James Cook at his current cost right now, which ADP wise looks at it like it's about at 42, as you can
Yeah.
see here on the chart. What are your thoughts on James Cook? Am I too low on him, or is he somebody that you're avoiding as well?
No, because he's in that really tricky range of the draft where you could survey 50 people and they'll each give you a different opinion on Chase Brown, Kyron Williams, Brees Hall, Cook, like we're talking about, even Kenneth Walker. And there's a lot of pros and cons to a lot of these guys, maybe not specifically their game and their ability, because I think they're all equally or similarly talented and tiered players. You just kind of like, you're not getting much of a discount on Cook, who typically you would be getting from such a inflated season from a touchdown perspective. But the nice thing going for him, and even I haven't found myself drafting much of him, is that they just didn't change anything. Again, right? I feel like a broken record on this show, but a lot of times I just talk about how I love teams that were really good last year and didn't change a damn thing, like the Bengals, like the Ravens, and that kind of brings a level of consistency to maybe we can project for 2025. But at RB14, I just don't think you're getting the same ceiling as you might be with a Kyron, with a Kenneth Walker if he pops under Clint Kubiak, with even a Kamara under Kellen Moore. So he's going to be there. He's going to be involved. They're going to keep him, they're obviously trying to take pressure off of Josh Allen and save him for, a deep playoff run, which obviously you can say that about any team who has a good quarterback. But specifically, they made a big change in how they use Josh Allen in the rushing game over the last few months of the season and even towards the end of 2023. So I just think there's guys with higher ceilings in this range. And even if you didn't want to go with a running back, I think this is that part of the draft where even the wide receivers are still pretty tantalizing if you're looking at like a Rashee Rice or a JSN or a Devontae Adams. So if you think the recession's coming from Cook and you can get those touchdowns somewhere else late in the draft, which I think you can, I'd punt away a little bit.
They didn't really add to the room. They bring back Ty Johnson. Ray Davis goes into year two, and I thought Ray Davis looked pretty good last year. Ray Davis had 6 total touchdowns, and he just had a 29.8% opportunity share. Cook's opportunity share was 25th in the NFL, where he had just 58.9%. So this is a guy that's not getting a very massive workload. Now, I do think he's a big part of the offense, but I have concerns about the regression with the total touchdowns. If those opportunities don't necessarily go up, then I don't know where he
Yeah.
makes up for the lack of touchdowns. Where, look, he had 6 touchdowns in 2023. He was the full-time guy in 2023, right? He had 18 total touchdowns in 2024. Even if you chop that down to like 8 touchdowns, which is a good projection, 8 to 10, right? You're talking about a miss of you're missing out on 8 to 10 total touchdowns from last year. And he, again, as I said, he didn't even crack inside the top 10 on a points per game basis with 18 total touchdowns, which was at the top of the NFL for running backs. Like,
Yeah.
I have concerns there. I think Ray Davis is a good player too. I don't think he's going to take over this backfield. I think they like Ty Johnson as a third down back. Josh Allen loves Ty
Mm.
Johnson, and this is also a dude that's not in camp right now, right? Or wasn't
Yeah.
at least wasn't in the voluntary stages, wasn't at mini camp, right? It seems like there's positive reports that he might show up day one,
Mhm.
but I don't know if I can bank on that. Rappaport made it seem like they are extremely far from a resolution on that contract, and I mean, it's almost like drafting a guy that's injured already, right? You're looking at a guy who's not like how many running backs have we seen hold out that just don't have a strong season? Like it seems like it's
Yeah.
happened a lot. And so I'm just James Cook is a guy I'm avoiding at his current cost. Before you continue, Chuck, I want to mention,
Mm.
guys that go around James Cook at the moment. You have guys like Kyron Williams,
Mm.
Brees Hall. You have Amara and Hampton who goes right behind Cook. Um, these are some guys you could
Yeah.
be considering. Maybe even Chuba Hubbard. Would you prefer Hubbard and Hampton who go right behind James Cook, or is that a little too low for Cook on you?
I would be comfortable passing on Cook and hoping that Hubbard fell. And if it didn't happen, I'd probably be okay. And the reason for that is that you take swings on some of these other guys that you just mentioned because you're talking about guys that could potentially be top 5 players at their position. And Cook, with all of those touchdowns last year on this amazing offense with the MVP of the league at quarterback, still only finished where he ended up finishing. He was 12th in fantasy points per game. I don't think it's going to get any better for him. So if you want the RB10, if you're like, that's what I want. I can build the rest of my roster after that. This is your guy. If you want to shoot for the moon a little bit more, like guys who wear fun shirts want to do, I'm taking somebody else.
And look, he was RB8 in total fantasy points, but he played 17 games and availability is super
Mm.
important. It's the best ability. Sorry, he played 16 games. And so, but we know running backs get hurt. But if we're talking about guys that are going to help you win your week, like I just don't see that necessarily from him. If I look back on James Cook, I mean, he had a couple of really, really big weeks in week 15, week 16. He had 26 and 27 points, but he scored 2 touchdowns in both of those games. If you look at games that he didn't score touchdowns in, right, majority of the time he was under 13 fantasy points. So again, that's a concern. And yeah, he's a guy that I'm fading currently. But let's go move
Mm.
on to our next player who is going to be one of your guys. It's going to be Xavier Worthy of the of the Kansas City Chiefs.
Mm.
Uh, Xavier Worthy, I'm going to give you the mic on this one first here. Worthy's ADP is 45, Chuck. Why
Yeah.
is Xavier Worthy? He was the first guy that you pretty quickly came up with.
Yeah.
Why are you fading Worthy right now?
It just frustrates me that I thought we were better than this as a community. And it's really only the ADP that bothers me here. I think if he was going a few rounds later, maybe like 3 or 4, I think I would love him kind of like I loved the Jamison Williams last year. Although I don't think he's going to be what Jamison Williams was. And I get that this guy he tagged by the Chiefs or pegged by the Chiefs as a late traded up for him. He's playing in a Mahomes offense. He's a burner, all that stuff. But I mean, I just look at all the actual information that we have in front of us. Let's go back to 2022, right? Mahomes threw 5,200 yards. He was the MVP. Kelsey had 1,300 yards. After that, it was Juju Smith with 900 and then MVS with 687. Now, let's say that Rashee Rice maybe pulls that Kelsey weight in, right? He's pushing 1,200, 1,300, maybe even 1,400 yards. I think he's a great player. That could be the case. Kelsey slides back down to that 900-ish yard, maybe even less. And then everyone else in this offense is basically fighting for scraps. And I think that Worthy is probably a better player than, an MVS or Justin Ross or some of the other guys they've had. But I don't think I just don't think he's as talented as his draft capital indicates. He basically catches the ball and runs out of bounds, or you hope you get lucky deep down the field, which has not been a big feature of this Chiefs offense. Mahomes, he's playing the EPA game. He wants to keep drives alive. He's not taking these crazy risky shots anymore. He's moving the chains. And I think that's still a little bit of Kelsey's game, and it's a whole lot of Rashee Rice's game. So I don't want the odd man out here at wide receiver 24, which is where I think he's going. You can correct me if I'm wrong. When I see wide receiver, what was it? So I just think there's a lot of other guys around his ADP that I'd much rather have: Metcalf, JMO, Flowers, Pickens, or if I wanted to go running back, maybe get like a Mixon, a Connor, Henderson, Harvey. I just think you can recreate these points significantly later in the draft from a week to week basis.
Sure. I would prefer even Devonta Smith and Cortland
Mhm.
Sutton who go behind him. With Worthy, I think you're just paying the tax on being connected to Patrick Mahomes, and we're paying that tax on Rashee Rice. But Rashee Rice, we've seen do it, even if it wasn't the largest sample size. Like we've seen Rashee Rice do it, and we're paying the tax on Rashee Rice now, who goes
Yeah.
inside the first 2 rounds. So to have Worthy, I think it's a bet that maybe fantasy players are making where, hey, if Rice isn't the number one, right, is it Worthy? But I would put I'd put a
Mm.
lot of money down
Yeah.
if we were saying who gets more volume. It's clearly going to be Rice, but Worthy provides more explosion. I don't need to sit there and tell you that. I mean, he's a very talented player when it comes to
Yeah.
athleticism, but this team also has Hollywood Brown, who he came back for another year, and Xavier Worthy, while he was a rookie last year, he had 59 receptions. He averaged 11 points per game, 638 yards, and 6 total touchdowns in an offense that didn't have Hollywood Brown for majority of the year, didn't have Rice for the majority of the year. He was pretty much a one-man band,
Mhm.
and he still was not putting on for us, from a fantasy points perspective. And
Yeah.
we can look at all these metrics that we want, but points per game wise, 11 points per game, good enough for 40, right? Like all these metrics, like points per game is probably the most important stat you can look
Yep.
at for these players. And in an offense where I mean, even the route participation, 75.2% of the routes, which is fine, still good enough for
Mm.
66. Like that, you had guys like Justin Watson out there, like other guys,
Yeah.
like Noah Gray was out there, like, and this is a
Yeah.
guy they spent high capital on. So I'm not in on Worthy again.
Mm.
I think you're paying a tax, and we're already paying it on Rice. I think to your point, I think
Yeah.
Worthy should be like 20 spots lower in my opinion. And I'm comfortable taking a lot of players around him.
Yeah, I'm surprised he's not going where like Jaden Reed is going, Khalil Shakir, Ricky Pearsall, that kind of range. We're basically just getting Mahomes up the yin yang, which is so funny because we just saw this offense get pantsed on national television is the last football memory I have, and yet we're not getting any benefit of that from any of the ADPs on the board. So I guess people are bullish on it. There's a lot of reasons to be if you're a little bit drunk or high, but I'm neither of those right now.
Yeah, the last thing I would say is if there, I think his price should be more around that Jordan Addison, Chris Godwin, Jerry Judy range, which is about
Mhm.
65, right? Right now he's at 45, 25 spots lower. I think just behind Chris Olave, I think is pretty fair. But as we kind of mentioned, I think he's just getting that Mahomes tax, and that's pushing him up. But
Yeah.
if you do want more insights on a lot of these stats that me and Chuck pull out of our butts, we're really
Mm.
not pulling it out of our butts because we're getting it from Player Profiler. We just dropped that draft kit. There is a promotion on the draft kit. So we're going to go ahead and roll that promo. And if you guys haven't already, you should be signed up.
The world famous draft kit is live, and it is this signature bit of content that we create every year to help you dominate your fantasy league. The most in-depth team previews you'll find anywhere, including signature trends and a lot of key stats on individual teams. Also, a 300-player cheat sheet for best ball, for seasonal leagues, individual cheat sheets from the top analysts here at Player Profiler. There's also video analysis and written analysis from some of the top minds in the industry. And we have all these new features like a Rate My Team feature, plug in your roster, and our AI tools automatically generate a draft score, as well as a whole commissioner guide. You have to subscribe to it to believe it. PlayerProfiler.com/draftkit, PlayerProfiler.com/draftkit. Get it now. Go win.
Yeah, and I absolutely love the features. I think Chuck was involved in that. I was
Mm.
involved in it, right? We put a ton of work into it. So props to the team on getting that together and tied up. It took a lot of time.
Oh
But
yeah.
let's move on to our next player here, Chuck. It's going to be Brock Bowers. This
Oof.
is probably coming as a surprise for many people. It's nothing about the talent, right? It's all about the ADP. I do not fade players. Very rarely do I fade the player. Most of the time I'm fading the ADP. And right now, Brock Bowers is going extremely high. His ADP has dropped a little bit since the beginning. We're kind of like April 29th if you're drafting on Underdog, where he was going inside the top 15 picks. Now he's settling in somewhere around pick 19, which is a mid second round to high second round pick. And I can't stomach that cost, Chuck. I if you look at what Brock Bowers did last year, it's he was still good enough on a points per game basis for tight end 3. Now he can get better, but this Raiders offense also they were third fewest in rushing attempts last year. They just added Ashton Genty. I expect them to run the football. And so I'm not saying Bowers is not going to be featured, but we're paying a price on a guy that's likely his ceiling, right?
Yeah.
Rarely do we see a tight end finish inside the top 12 in fantasy points on the season. I don't see it happening for Bowers. It's nothing about the talent, but we're paying for his ceiling, and I'd much rather, get guys at a cheaper cost at that position.
Yeah, it's tricky because what you're praying for this year is basically you get like second year George Kittle, right? To where, George Kittle comes in, he has a pretty nice rookie year, although not what Bowers had. And then the next year, I think he had he broke the tight end receiving yard record or something like that. On not a ton of targets too, 136 targets compared to like the 150 plus that Bowers got last year. So, Bowers had a pretty low yards per catch last year. I think it was like in the 10s, but he had quarterbacks that were throwing 6 yards per attempt, Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell, and then you bring in Geno, who's in 7.5 over the last 3 years, some of that with Pete. So, Pete's not necessarily going to be the offensive guru here. It's going to be a Chip Kelly show, but this is a team that I think is going to push the ball down the field. But even if all of that comes together, we're coming fresh off the heels of Sam Laporta, who just went second, third round of drafts last year and had one of the worst tight end 1 seasons we've seen in a while. And I think there's a possibility we get some of that with Bowers. Like second round ADP, you want a significant positional advantage from week to week from the guys that are going to be going after him. And I just don't think you're getting that from McBride, from Kittle, from Mark Andrews, from Sam Laporta, some of these other guys that are going late. I'm just having a lot of trouble seeing this offense be some sort of powerhouse. Now, if you're banking on PPR, just him going ham, because he is by far the alpha in this passing offense, I can't argue with you there. But when he's being drafted with guys like AJ Brown, Devon Achane, Nico Collins, it is a little bit harder for me to stomach.
Yeah. And I have no doubt that Bowers likely, finishes the season as tight end 1. But I think McBride and I also think George Kittle have arguments to make there. So his cost being as much more expensive than a guy like Kittle, who's in a much better offense, is kind of confusing. You get Kittle, in like round 4 or 5, and you're paying again inside the top 2 rounds for Bowers. Yeah. I also just look at if you just take a look at Bowers on the year last season, he finished 18th in total points, which is right behind CeeDee Lamb, which is great. Like he had a great season. But again, we have to remember that they brought in Ashton Genty. They ran the football like third least in the NFL. Like I can't ignore that. I love Brock Bowers, the talent. I don't love Brock Bowers at the price, and he's just not a player that I'm looking to spend up on. I love the tight end position this year. I think there is a ton of value. When you look at a points per game basis, though, he was third in points per game, behind Kittle and behind Trey McBride. So I don't know why he's being pushed up. I get it, generational talent. We throw that around a ton, but when you also look at Trey McBride and you compare him to Brock Bowers had 153 targets last year. Trey McBride had 147. Bowers had 1 more reception than McBride. Yeah. McBride had just 2 touchdowns. I don't think McBride has only 2 touchdowns again. Like that's going to come back up. It's like, there's just no way. And so McBride still finished with more fantasy points per game with less touchdowns and 1 less reception. Like to me, why wouldn't you can make the argument that McBride and Kittle can finish ahead of him. So I'm just not paying that cost for a tight end unless his name's Travis Kelce and it was 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, and you're not. I think that's probably what I think people need to really remember is I really don't think even in the range of outcomes it's possible that we get those second round 80 valuations of those Kelce seasons from Brock Bowers. I don't think they have the offensive infrastructure to do it. I don't think they're going to have the red zone trips to do it. I don't think you're going to be getting up there in 15 yards per catch for Bowers. Unless they come out and they just want to go nuts with it because Geno's getting old, Pete Carroll's getting old. They're in Vegas. Maybe there's something about in the air there that I'm not privy to right now, but otherwise, I think this is probably going to be, like you said, a run-centric, get the ball out quick kind of offense. Because otherwise, I just don't see it working like I knew I could. Because I had a decade of Andy Reid making it work. I had several years of Alex Smith making it work with him before they passed the torch to Mahomes. Like there wasn't a lot of questions going into the following season like we have with them right now, and you're not getting it at a discount. So that's going to be the theme of the show, right? ADP fades. None of these are discounts.
Yeah. Last thing I would say on Bowers and just McBride is just McBride had one less catch, but he also played one less game. So again, I mean, the volume was just they connected better. I do think Bowers gets an upgrade, which is important to note with coordinator, with coach, but the run game for the Cardinals is not going to be better than the run game for the Raiders. And the Cardinals ran much more than the Raiders did last year as well. So that's the last thing I will say on Bowers. Let's move to our final player. It's going to be David Montgomery, who was Chuck's pick. And this one kind of hurts my soul. David Montgomery has been just a favorite of mine, just watching him play. I just love his rushing style, but I can understand that there are some concerns. I'd like to hear from Chuck as to why he has concerns. But before Chuck does, I will note Montgomery is 71.5 in ADP right now. Chuck, just give it to us straight, man.
I don't want to give it to you guys at all, let alone give it to you straight. It hurts my gut. So RB23 coming off the boards. Guys, this is the one that I've taken a shot for before we do this segment. And it breaks my heart because he's been so good to me these last 2 seasons. And his price tag isn't even worst case scenario, but with the losses to the offensive line, Ragnar retiring, Zeitler moving on, Ben Johnson in New York, someone's going to suffer on this offense. I don't know who, but I can assure you, whether it's the passing game or the run game, it's not going to be Jahmyr Gibbs. These high-end handcuffs that can borderline on flex plays, and Montgomery, he's had weeks where he's been a lot better than that, and he's also had weeks where he's been worse. They have short lifespans, and eventually, when they've been sharing the ball with somebody, that other dude eventually eats them like 2 twins in the womb. So Saints moved on from Ingram once they had Kamara. Bijan's already dominating the backfield in Atlanta. Achane squeezed Mostert out. Pollard forced Zeke out of Dallas. Aaron Jones pretty much body bagged everybody who came for the crown there. Austin Eckler put the kibosh on Melvin Gordon. Eventually, Connor for real leaves the Style Boys, even though there's still talent back on the table. So for this one, for me, I think that if there's going to be a stat back on this team, it's going to be in the run game, and it's specifically going to be their ability to rush in the style that Montgomery does. And for RB24 and where he's going around, I just feel like there's other guys in there that could potentially give you maybe not league winning value, but certainly, an RJ Harvey, a Trevion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, Caleb Johnson. Jesus, did I only name rookies there? I just feel like these guys have higher upside while still having similar floors.
When David Montgomery, he is a tough player to evaluate right now. When he came back from the injury last year in the playoffs, he didn't look like himself. Now it was a small sample size, and so I'm not going to hinge it if I'm drafting him or not because of one playoff game against Washington where he touched the ball 7 times. Okay, like that's not enough for me to say I'm out on a guy. What I would say about Montgomery is I truly think he is this heart and soul of this offense. Like honestly, like I think I think Campbell loves him. I think the team loves him. I think he's truly a guy that sets the tone. And it wouldn't surprise me if week 1, first carry, it's David Montgomery back there. Like it just wouldn't surprise me. But what I would say is there are people that disagree with this philosophy, Chuck, and maybe you agree with them and disagree with me, but it is okay to take safe players. You can't always
Sure.
draft upside, right? If you're playing in tournament style, I understand like drafting very, very high upside because you want to win the pot. And so you're taking a lot of upside shots, but like sometimes you do need floor players. Now, when you look at Montgomery, right, he is the definition of a floor player. Like over the last few years, 16th, 15th in points per game, right? Like he's giving you that like mid RB2 floor with not a ton of ceiling unless he's finding himself in the end zone, which
Yeah.
on multiple occasions he gets in there 2 times a game at times. But with David Montgomery, you noted some guys around him. You have Caleb Johnson, you have Quinshon Judkins. Those feel like floor plays as well, similar to Montgomery, where I don't think their ceilings are nearly as high because of the offenses that they play in. So you might just rather take a shot on the younger, probably more healthier players with Caleb and Quinshon Judkins over Montgomery, but you can also make the case that Monty's in a much better offense. Obviously, Ben Johnson's gone, but I still think that offense is going to be good. Maybe take a little bit of a step back.
Yeah.
Now, the one player I would say is I'm starting to buy more in on DeAndre Swift, right? He is not like his floor is lower than Montgomery's, but he provides a lot of receiving upside. And I think the ceiling is higher just because the unknown of what the offense will look like and they've made improvements. So
Yeah.
Swift could be the definition of like, I'm going to take this guy. He's more risky than David Montgomery, than Caleb, than Quinshon, but like the ceiling is higher because of the offense he'll be in and the skill set
Yeah.
and he catches the football a ton. So like I could see arguments for Swift over those guys. To me, unless you really think upside is high for Caleb and Quinshon, right? Then you should probably just go with them over Montgomery because we know the ceiling is not as high with him, but the floor
Yeah.
is high. If you're worried about just those two players in general because the offenses are going to stink, and you think maybe that the floor is not that high because of how bad the offenses are, then you go David Montgomery. But
Yeah.
there is worry with the skill set and will he fall off, and with the injuries last year and Gibbs ascending even more. But I'm kind of torn on Montgomery. I don't have much shares of him in best ball. I faded him a lot. I'm starting to kind of buy in a little bit more because that price of RB23 is really, really affordable. And I think he's going to
Yeah.
he's going to break into the top 20 by August, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's it's to kind of put a bow on this. We opened with James Cook, right? It's like, how badly do you want the RB10 in points per game if you know that's all you're getting, versus like, okay, how badly do you want the RB24 in points per game if you know what you're getting? And I mean, if you're looking at cost, I'm taking Montgomery over Cook as far as somebody who I know can give me RB1 weeks, but will never give me anything worse than like RB24. But I still think in that range, I like the hubris of thinking that I can tag one of these guys to break out of one of these running back fields like Cleveland, like Pittsburgh, as opposed to maybe having the second dog to the bowl for a Detroit team that potentially could take a stop back from like the best offense in the league to maybe like the 7th or 8th. However, that's why we play the game. And once September rolls around, we're either going to be right or wrong.
Yeah, I will say it's starting to get harder and harder the longer these older running backs stay playing well, because it used to be easier to be like, yeah, I'm fading him, they're gonna fall off. But like you look at guys like Tony Pollard, you can look at guys like Aaron Jones, like those guys go at decent values too. You look at David Montgomery, who's getting up there in age as well, and it's like it's making it harder to make decisions on some of these guys because they're playing a little bit later, right? Not
Yeah.
Derrick Henry is more of an anomaly, but it is making it a little harder to decipher between players. But that's going to do it for us, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and make sure you hit a like button. And feel free to let us know in the comments what you think. We really appreciate the support. It's been awesome. And we'll see you guys next time.